Hello, witchy people. You may be wondering why I'm sat here in the dark with nothing but a cup of coffee, a solitary lit candle, and a snoring dog to keep me company. Well, many years ago, I used to run a website called The Haunted ChaCha. And on that site, I would write down the tales that people had told me, not necessarily ghost stories, just tales of strange happenings, weird goings on in strange places, eerie places, places that were supposedly haunted, maybe. So if you want to hear a few, grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and I'll tell you some. This story is called The Flat. In Weston, there's a huge tower block, and on the 10th floor, there's a flat that's empty. It hasn't always been empty. The tower block was built in around 1969, and over the years, up until the 80s, early 90s, it was used. This particular flat was always inhabited, but not always by the living. Going back in the late 80s and early 90s, Southampton City Council had a bit of a problem with housing. Too many people, not enough places to put them to live. So they had this idea that 2-bedroom flats could be rented to 2 separate people, and they could split the rent, like a house share, but in a flat. And this is what happened to the flat on the 10th floor of Canberra Towers. That was the name of the tower block, Canberra Towers. And I should know because I was born there. So the council rented out the flat to 3 students, 2 men that shared one room, and a girl that had another room. Everything seemed fine. They moved in some of their belongings. It was a nice flat. It had an ocean view, well, a beach view. It's a beach. It's an inlet from the channel. It was, on the whole, a nice place to live and quiet most of the time. One evening, the boys said they were going out, and the young girl there decided that she really had too much college work to catch up on, so she would stay in. She locked herself in her bedroom to study hard. About 2 hours after the boys had gone out, she went out of her room and started to go into the tiny kitchen, just to make herself a cup of tea to keep her going. The chairs were all stacked up on top of the table. It was like a scene from Poltergeist the movie. Of course, she just assumed that the boys had been playing a trick on her. They'd stacked the chairs before they'd gone out. So she unstacked the chairs, placed them back under the table, made her cup of tea, and went back to her room. No more than half an hour later, she was feeling a bit peckish, so decided to go back to the kitchen to make herself a sandwich. And once again, the chairs were stacked on top of the table. She didn't think it was that odd. She was just a bit angry. The boys had obviously come back home and were playing a trick on her. She had better things to do with her time than to keep taking chairs off of the table and pushing them back underneath the table. She had an essay to finish. She made her sandwich. She put the chairs back under the table and then went back to her room. Not long after, she heard the door open. She poked her head out of her room and said to the boys, "Oh, ha ha, very funny. Bet you thought it was a great joke pretending to be out so you could stack the chairs." They looked at her like she was going slightly crazy, which at that point she thought she may have been. The following evening, things were a little bit cool, shall we say. Obviously, the girl thought the boys had been playing a trick, and the boys thought the girl was mad. They were all in their rooms when they suddenly heard a huge bang and a crash. They rushed out, each of them, of their respective bedrooms. The boys from one room, the girl from another, and just stared at each other. "What the hell are you doing?" said the girl to the boys, and the boys said much the same back to her at the same time. Each thought that the other had been making this huge cacophony of noise. They walked into the lounge, and the TV cabinet, it was a huge TV in a big wooden cabinet, had moved right the way across the room. Obviously, the boys thought the girl had done it because of the whole table and chairs thing, and the girl thought the boys had done it to carry on with their trick, their game. Well, the girl decided from then that she was actually going to sleep on the sofa for the rest of the night, and that would stop the boys from playing any more tricks, because she would hear them if they came into the kitchen or the lounge. About 2 hours after everyone had gone back to their rooms and the girl had gone to sleep on the sofa, there was more huge bangs and crashes, this time coming from the girl's room. She got up and ran to her bedroom, expecting to find the boys there and catching them out. The room was empty, but her wardrobe had moved. Her wardrobe had moved almost to the other side of the room. Now, it wasn't a huge bedroom, but surely that was going to be quite difficult to move it. The boys were fast asleep. They hadn't heard a thing. She decided it was time for a house meeting, so she called everyone into the lounge. They sat down and discussed the weird goings on. "Well, I think it's you," she said to the boys. And the boys just laughed at her. "Well, we think it's you," they said. They were arguing when suddenly a huge clattering crash could be heard from the kitchen. All three of them got up and ran to the kitchen to find all the cupboard doors open and the crockery smashed all over the floor. "Well, that wasn't either one of us, was it?" said the boy to the girl, and the girl to the boys. And then they heard it, a huge, booming voice that just said, "Get out." The girl screamed. The boys started to run around like headless chickens, not quite knowing what to do. And then it said it again. "Get out of my home." They didn't need telling twice. She ran in her pyjamas straight out the door. The boys ran back to their bedroom and packed a few things, which was rather silly really, because if someone had told me to get out of the house and I couldn't see them, I'd go straight away. Over the next few days, they found out that before they had moved in, the previous resident had been quite an aged man. He lived out his last days in the 10th floor flat of Canberra Towers and had died there. Obviously, he still thought that his home was his home and didn't want anyone else there.